I still remember the exact words. Rachel, you're not really part of this family anymore. You made your choice. It wasn't a screaming match. No drama. Just cold, calculated dismissal. Like I was an unwanted guest at my own mother's house. We were standing in the kitchen, a casserole still in the oven, and my nephew Jacob was playing in the living room. I had shown up with a birthday gift for my dad and walked into an ambush. They sat me down like they were conducting a board meeting.
Mom, Dad.
My brother, Sean. His wife, Carrie. All of them looking at me like I was some outsider who'd committed treason. And then my father said, Rachel, sometimes blood just isn't enough. That's when I realized they had already erased me from their family, like I was never part of it. And all I could do was sit there, shaking, trying not to cry in front of them. Have you ever been pushed out of your own family, like you didn't even matter? Comment below, because I need to know I'm not the only one.
It wasn't always like this.
Growing up, I was the heart of the family. The classic peacemaker, always helping mom in the kitchen, sitting with dad watching football, and being the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, even the cousins. Sean was more distant, a bit of a rebel, but I loved him anyway. I was the glue that held things together when our parents went through rough patches. I still remember when I met James, my late husband. It was at a 4th of July barbecue at my best friend Lindsay's house. He showed up wearing the most ridiculous American flag shirt and flip-flops, holding a plate stacked so high with ribs, I thought it would collapse. We locked eyes across the grill, and the first thing he said to me was, "If you take the last corn on the cob, I swear I'll marry you." I did. He kept his word. James was kind. Funny in a way that didn't try too hard. He used to make up little songs when we were doing laundry or driving. And he had this way of making everyone in a room feel seen. My family adored him at first. Dad called him the calm in Rachel's storm. Mom used to pull him aside and say, "You're the reason she smiles so much." The wedding was small, backyard, fairy lights, barefoot dancing. Sean even made a toast. He joked, "Can't believe someone finally agreed to marry Rachel without a bribe." Everyone laughed, and for a while, I truly believed I had it all. But looking back now, there were signs. Tiny cracks I ignored. When James got a job offer in Seattle, and I decided to move with him, that's when the temperature in the family began to shift. Mom didn't say it outright, but I felt it in her voice, that tight smile over the phone. "Of course, we support you," she said. "But you'll be so far away." I brushed it off. Love comes first, right? I thought distance would never change what we had. I thought I could always come home. I was wrong. It started with small things, the kind of things you tell yourself not to take personally. I remember one Thanksgiving, James and I flew in from Seattle, exhausted from the red-eye flight and juggling time zones. I had called ahead, told Mom we'd be arriving early, so we could help prep dinner. When we walked through the door, no one even looked up. Mom barely glanced at me from the kitchen. "Oh, you made it," she said flatly. "We weren't sure if you'd show." I blinked. "I called 2 days ago. I said we'd be here by 9. Sean was already carving the turkey. That had always been Dad's job. He looked over his shoulder and muttered, "Well, we figured you'd cancel last minute like last year." I froze. Last year, James had surgery. We couldn't fly. James squeezed my hand gently, whispering, "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. That night, James and I offered to do the dishes. Mom waved us off, saying, "Just go rest. The family doesn't need saving, Rachel." That line stuck with me. A few months later, my cousin Beth got engaged. There was a big family group chat on Messenger. Pictures were flying back and forth, venues being debated, cake samples shared. I noticed I was suddenly not on the thread. When I asked Sean about it, he said, "You've been gone so long, Rachel. No one knew if you'd even come to the wedding." "I RSVP'd 2 weeks ago," I snapped. He shrugged. "Well, you're not really in the loop anymore." I laughed nervously, trying to defuse it. "I'm still part of the family, Sean." He didn't respond. I wanted to believe it was stress, that everyone was just adjusting to me being in another state. But then came the Christmas gift incident. I had mailed handmade photo albums for each of my nieces and nephews. Hours spent on Shutterfly, choosing the perfect pictures, adding funny captions. I wrapped each one with gold ribbon and sent them to Mom's house ahead of our arrival. When we walked in on Christmas Eve, I saw them, still stacked on the kitchen counter. Unopened. Unlabeled. I asked Mom about it. She barely looked up from basting the ham. Oh, those? I didn't know what they were. I figured it was something from Amazon.
I texted you about them, I said.
I said they were from me, for the kids. She didn't apologize. Just shrugged. Well, they've already opened their gifts anyway. That was the moment James looked at me and mouthed, "This isn't just forgetfulness." I tried to bring it up gently to Dad later that evening, just the two of us, while everyone was watching Home Alone in the other room. He didn't even let me finish. "Rachel," he said sharply, "you always read too much into things. Not everything's about you."
It wasn't just about me.
It was the cold distance, the missed calls, the way no one asked about James's health anymore, the way no one noticed I was silently struggling with a miscarriage the previous fall, something I didn't even get a "how are you holding up" for. I once overheard Aunt Claire ask Mom, "How's Rachel doing after everything?" And Mom replied, "She's always dramatic. She'll be fine." Dramatic. I had lost a baby. I had watched my husband cry in the dark, holding an empty onesie we'd bought too soon. But I was being dramatic. That winter, I stopped texting first. I stopped sending reminders for birthdays, stopped organizing Zoom calls for holidays. And no one noticed. Or maybe worse, they noticed and didn't care. It was early June when the call came. A Sunday morning. James and I had just finished a long walk through Green Lake Park. We were sipping coffee when my phone rang, Sean's name flashing across the screen. Something in my gut twisted. "Hey," I answered. "Everything okay?"
His voice was flat, tight.
"Dad had a stroke last night." I felt the world spin.
What? When?
Is he okay?" "He's gone, Rachel." The words hit like a crash. He didn't say, "He passed away." He said he's gone. Like it was too late for anything. I couldn't breathe. James had to take the phone from my shaking hand. I remember hearing Sean mumble something about the funeral being in 3 days. "We're keeping it small," he said. "Just close family." I blinked. "I am close family," I said. Sean was silent. Then, "Look, it's been hard for Mom. Let's not make this more complicated." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father was gone, and I wasn't even allowed to grieve him with the people who raised me. James called the airline, booked us on the next flight out. I didn't care if they didn't want me there. I had to be there. When we landed in Chicago, it was already late. I called Mom from the car. No answer. We pulled up to the house, lights off. James rang the doorbell. Nothing. Eventually, Aunt Claire answered. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Rachel, I didn't know you were coming." "Of course I'm coming," I said. He was my father. She stepped aside, reluctantly. Inside, the living room looked like it had already been rearranged, like no one had just lost the most important man in their lives. I found Mom in the kitchen, arms folded. "You shouldn't have come," she said. I blinked. "What are you talking about?" Her voice didn't shake. It was icy calm. "You've been distant for years, Rachel. You made your choices." "I was never not part of this family," I snapped. She gave a bitter little smile. "You made it clear we were just a seasonal visit. I've called. I've sent gifts. I tried. But you left," she said. "You built your life without us." I couldn't believe this was happening. "I loved him," I whispered. "Doesn't that count for anything?" "No," she said simply. "Not when it's too late." That night, I slept in a motel. The next morning, I stood outside the church, watching from the parking lot as people streamed in, cousins, old neighbors, even my old Sunday school teacher. But not me. James wanted to fight it, wanted to march in and demand space for me. But I held his hand and said, "It's not worth it." The final betrayal came a week later. A letter, handwritten, from Mom. "Rachel, we've decided not to include your name in the obituary. It wouldn't make sense to people who haven't seen you in years. Please understand this is for clarity, not malice. Your mother." Clarity, not malice. They had written me out. As if I never existed. I reread it over and over, hoping the ink would blur into something softer, more forgivable. But it didn't. It was final. That night, I sat on the porch, the warm Seattle wind brushing past, and whispered to James, "I don't think I have a family anymore." He didn't say anything. He just held me as I cried harder than I ever had in my life. The days after the funeral were strange. Quiet, heavy, but also freeing. There was something almost spiritual about being so completely cut off from the past. Like I had been untethered, no longer anchored by guilt, expectations, or the subtle thread that had tied me to a version of myself I no longer recognized. It hurt, but in the way a wound stings before it starts to heal. James was there every step, making breakfast without asking, booking us a cabin in the San Juan Islands just to breathe, he said. I didn't even know how badly I needed that until we got there. The cabin was tucked away between evergreens, with no reception and a dock that reached into the sound. I spent the first 2 days just listening to the water, letting it carry some of the weight. One night, James sat beside me on the deck, our feet dangling just above the water. "You don't have to rebuild anything you don't want to," he said softly. "Not with them. Not with anyone." I turned to him. "Then what do I do with this emptiness?" He looked at me, eyes clear. "Fill it with people who actually show up." And that's what I started doing. Slowly, deliberately, I began creating my own family. Not one defined by blood or history, but by choice. I started volunteering at the local community center, something my dad used to do every Christmas. It was strange how the act of giving reminded me of him more than any photograph ever could. That's where I met Claire, a retired English teacher with a sharp tongue and a heart that pulsed with warmth. We shared stories over coffee breaks. She gave me books and advice, and something else I didn't realize I missed: maternal energy. Gentle, non-judgmental, present. James's sister, Haley, started visiting more often too. She brought her daughter, a wild-haired, curious little thing named Maddie, who decided I was her fairy aunt. I let her believe it. And then there was Jonah, a neighbor 2 houses down, single dad, carpenter, sometimes lonely. We weren't close at first, but when his daughter got the flu, I brought soup. He brought me tomatoes from his garden a week later. Small things. Real things. Each moment stitched together a new tapestry. A dinner here. A shared laugh there. A group text about a meteor shower. A spontaneous Sunday brunch. I wasn't replacing my old family. I was evolving beyond them. One evening, 6 months after the funeral, James and I hosted a small dinner party. Just 6 of us, including Claire, Jonah, and Haley. At some point, after the laughter had faded into comfortable silence, Claire raised her glass. "To Rachel," she said, "for showing us how to survive heartbreak with grace." I smiled, suddenly aware that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and not in the shadow of what was lost, but in the warmth of what I had built. That night, as I curled up in bed, I whispered to James, "I think I finally understand what home is." He kissed my forehead. "Yeah, it's the people who choose you, and keep choosing you, even when you're hard to love." It was almost a year to the day when I found the letter, buried inside a dog-eared copy of Leaves of Grass, tucked so deliberately between the pages that I knew, somehow, my mother had put it there for me. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, neat, measured like everything she ever did. "Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. Or we're broken in a way that can't be patched. I don't know which is worse." My breath caught. I wasn't a perfect mother. I think I tried so hard to survive that I forgot to make space for you to live. I resented your softness because I had to be hard. I envied your freedom because mine was taken early. And I judged you through the same lens I judged myself, harshly. But the truth is, I always knew you were braver than me. You did what I never could. You left. You started over. And I hope you forgive me for the years I didn't know how to love you without trying to fix you. Tears welled up before I could stop them. You are not broken. You never were. You were simply born into a family that didn't know how to hold your kind of light. I hope someday you find people who do. And I hope you become the woman I glimpsed in flashes, strong, soft, and sovereign. I'm sorry I didn't tell you this sooner.
Love.
Mom. I sat with the letter for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands, the ache in my chest both sharp and soothing. For the first time, I felt her. Not the woman I argued with. Not the mother who judged and corrected and tightened the leash every time I pulled away. But the little girl inside her. Hurt. Unloved. Trying her best with the tools she had. And I felt myself, not as the angry, grieving daughter, but as the woman who had survived. No, become. I folded the letter and slipped it into a frame on my nightstand. Not to memorialize the pain, but to remember the truth. We're all just learning how to love better. And sometimes, love shows up late, but it still counts. That week, I planted peonies in the backyard, her favorite. Pink, full-bodied blooms that reminded me of her perfume. I didn't cry this time. I smiled. Haley came by later that day. "You okay?" she asked, watching me wipe dirt from my hands. "Yeah," I said. "I think I'm finally okay." She looked at the flowers. "Your mom?"
Yeah.
I turned toward the house, where James was laughing in the kitchen with Maddie and Claire. The sound floated out the window, like music. "Funny," I added. "It took losing everything I thought I needed to find everything I truly wanted." Haley squeezed my hand. That night, as the stars stretched overhead, I lit a single candle by the window. Not for mourning, but as a lighthouse. To anyone like me who needed to know that it's possible. To leave.
To grieve.
To forgive. And to begin again. Sometimes, healing doesn't look like a sunrise. It looks like an old photo in a drawer you finally throw away. Like deleting a number you memorized by pain, not love. Like realizing the silence between you and someone you once worshipped is finally just silence, not punishment. I used to think closure came from conversations. That if I just explained myself right, or said the perfect words, or got that one apology, I'd feel whole. But real closure? It came quietly. On an ordinary Tuesday. When I made myself a cup of coffee, without thinking of her. When I laughed, really laughed, at something dumb James said. When Maddie called me Mom, like she'd been waiting her whole life to say it. That was it. That's when I knew I was no longer living in reaction to what broke me. I was living for what rebuilt me. And maybe that's what becoming whole truly means. Not going back and rewriting the past, but standing fully in the present, finally unafraid of who you had to become just to make it here. So if you're listening to this, maybe you're somewhere in between the heartbreak and the healing. Maybe you're staring at the ashes, wondering if anything beautiful can grow again.
Please hear me.
You don't owe your past a monument, but you do owe your future a chance. And the moment you say, "I deserve peace more than I deserve answers," that's the moment everything begins to shift. Because peace isn't found in their apology. It's found in your permission to begin again.